There is a strange pressure that begins to build the moment you enter your 30s, an invisible weight that wraps around your chest and whispers, "You're behind." It doesn't scream, it doesn't shout, it just murmurs, constantly, quietly, in your ear, in your thoughts, in the way you compare yourself to others, the way you measure time against people who chose different paths, the way you scroll through your phone at night, wondering how they did it, and why you didn't. But what if I told you that your 30s are not a deadline? They are a doorway into a different kind of life. One built on clarity, not chaos. One that doesn't rush, but understands. One that doesn't need to prove, but simply is. Because the truth is, your 20s were never supposed to define you. They were just the rehearsal, the experiment, the chaos before the calm. Most people don't get that. Most people panic. They look at their bank accounts, their job titles, the lack of rings on their fingers, the lack of children in their homes, and they start to spiral, thinking they've missed something vital, something irreversible. But what they don't realize is that the 30s are where you begin to shape the life you truly want, not the life you were told to want. You begin to shed the borrowed dreams, the ones you carried because someone else said you should. You begin to listen, really listen, to the voice inside you that was drowned out by the noise of shoulds and musts. You begin to understand that success isn't a finish line, it's a frequency, and maybe you were never tuned into it because the signal was blocked by fear or doubt, or the need to belong where you didn't fit. This decade is not about catching up, it's about coming home to yourself. It's in your 30s that you realize how deeply you've been conditioned to panic when you're not ahead. But ahead of what? Ahead of whom? There is no race. There is no scoreboard. There is only your life, and the way you choose to live it, rebuild it, reshape it. Quietly, patiently, deliberately. You are not late. You are simply aware, and awareness is not a weakness. It is a superpower. It's the ability to pause and ask, is this really what I want? Or is this just what I've been told I should want? And the moment you begin to ask that question, you step into something powerful. You step into ownership, into presence, into alignment. You stop living to impress. You start living to express, to feel, to connect. You begin to forgive yourself for not knowing back then what you know now. And you understand that wisdom doesn't come early. It comes when you're ready to receive it. The world will try to convince you that you're running out of time, but the world is wrong. Time doesn't run out, it resets. Every morning you wake up with a new chance to begin, a new opportunity to choose, a new page, even if you're writing it with hands that have trembled from the past. You are not broken. You are unfolding. The people who look like they have it all figured out, they don't. They're just louder. They're just curated. They're just faster at pretending. But real growth, real transformation, real peace is quiet. It's subtle. It's unseen until it's undeniable. And that's what your 30s are. They are the decade of quiet revolution, the silent pivot, the moment where you turn, Not because you're lost, but because you've finally found the courage to walk your own way. So don't rush. Don't panic. Don't shrink. Your 30s are not the ending. They are the invitation to live again, this time by your own design. There is a beauty in arriving late to your own life. A rare kind of grace that comes when you finally stop chasing someone else's timeline and start walking slowly, steadily, toward a version of yourself that feels true. There is no shame in blooming later, only silence misunderstood as failure. But in that silence, something sacred is taking shape. This is not the decade where everything needs to make sense. It's the decade where you allow things to unmake. You begin peeling away identities you wore like armor. Student, achiever, good child, perfectionist. You start to realize how heavy those names became, how small they made you feel when life didn't fit inside them. Your 30s are not a continuation of your 20s. They are a rebirth, and rebirth never happens without discomfort. You'll lose people. You'll walk away from plans. You'll disappoint expectations that were never yours to carry. And you'll learn, often through quiet grief, that growth doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like standing still and breathing. There will be mornings when you wake up and feel behind. That's okay. It means you care. It means your life matters enough to want more. But don't let that longing turn into punishment. Let it become a prayer, a soft vow to move gently forward, even if no one claps, even if no one notices. Especially then. No one tells you that your 30s are the decade of internal work, the slow excavation of all the things you buried just to survive your 20s. The fear of being seen, the fear of being left behind, the fear of being ordinary. And when those things rise to the surface, it can feel like regression. But it isn't. It's healing. Healing is not glamorous. It's quiet. It's hidden. It's unmeasurable by social metrics. But it is the most important work you will ever do, and in your 30s, you begin to finally have the courage and space to do it. You'll start to notice that your definition of success changes, that it becomes less about speed and more about depth, less about things and more about moments, less about being impressive and more about being at peace. And when that shift begins, you'll feel something unexplainable, a settling of the soul, like coming home after a long journey. You might find yourself starting over, new job, new city, new purpose, and it will scare you, but let that fear be the compass, because starting over in your 30s is not a sign of failure, it's a sign of clarity. It means you were brave enough to stop building a life that didn't feel like yours. And maybe you're still figuring it out. That's okay. The figuring is the path. The stumbles are the wisdom. The pauses are the medicine. You are not where you used to be. And that alone is reason to trust that you are moving, even when the world doesn't applaud. Let go of the belief that you need to arrive anywhere by a certain age. Let go of the timelines drawn by fear and conformity. You are not a deadline. You are a lifetime, and your value does not expire with youth. It deepens with time, like wine, like art, like truth. There is power in the quiet decisions you make now, the choice to rest when you used to force, the choice to say no when you used to please, the choice to try again, not because you failed, but because you've grown. These are not small acts, these are revolutions. And this is your quiet revolution. You're not late. You're right on time. Because real life begins when you stop performing and start becoming. There will come a day, quiet, unannounced, when you'll wake up and realize that you no longer want what you once chased. That the things that once felt urgent now feel hollow. That the people you tried to impress no longer occupy your thoughts. And that moment, though subtle, will mark the beginning of your true adulthood. Not measured in years, but in self-awareness. Your 30s are not about rising quickly, they're about rooting deeply. And roots don't make noise when they grow. They just keep pushing downward, silently, into the unknown, anchoring you into a steadiness you didn't know you needed. You stop wanting to be everywhere. You stop wanting to be seen by everyone. Instead, you begin wanting to be known, deeply, truly, by the few who matter. The friendships change. The conversations deepen. The silence becomes less threatening, more sacred. You realize how little you need to be happy, and how much you've been carrying that you don't. The healing is no longer something you hope for someday. It becomes something you honor daily, in your routines, in your boundaries, in your breath. You become gentle with your own becoming. And that gentleness is what allows you to finally grow. You stop performing perfection. You stop decorating your pain for applause. You begin to tell the truth, not just to others, but to yourself. You say things like, I'm tired. I don't know. I want something different. And you stop apologizing for it. The old self doesn't disappear all at once. It lingers. It questions. But with every step you take in alignment, its voice grows quieter. Until one day, you no longer need to silence it, because you've outgrown it. In your 30s, you become a witness to your own life, watching the stories you told yourself unravel and give birth to new ones. You realize that endings are not the opposite of beginnings. They are the soil from which beginnings grow. You learn to stay, to sit in discomfort without escaping, to love without pretending, to rest without guilt, to hope without proof. This is what your 30s offer, not certainty but capacity, not speed but substance, not fame but fullness. And in that fullness, you begin to find peace, not the kind sold in images and quotes, but the kind you feel when you're alone in your room and your mind is finally quiet, the kind that doesn't need anyone to see it to be real. This is your silent pivot, the turning point no one will notice, but one that will change everything. You are not late. You are simply learning the value of timing. There's something sacred about no longer needing to prove yourself, about reaching a stage where you realize that not everything needs to be shared, posted, validated, or understood. Silence becomes a strategy, not a symptom. You begin to conserve your energy, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. You start protecting your peace like it's gold, because it is. In your 30s, you start to understand the cost of everything, not just in money, but in time, in emotion, in mental clarity. You begin to ask better questions. Does this align with my peace? Does this version of success actually feel good? Am I building something real, or am I chasing something hollow? The truth is, when you're in your 30s, you're not starting late. You're just starting consciously. You've seen enough to know what doesn't work. You've failed enough to know the shape of your own resilience, and that makes you dangerous in the best way. You're no longer desperate. You're deliberate. You begin to see yourself not through the lens of what you lack, but through the quiet strength of everything you've survived. You remember nights you didn't sleep, days you showed up despite the weight, conversations you had with yourself that no one will ever hear. And slowly that becomes your foundation. You start letting go of urgency. You begin to detach from the myth that your worth is tied to your productivity. You learn how to rest without punishing yourself, how to breathe without needing to rush to the next milestone, how to just be, fully, unapologetically, without needing to earn your own presence. And there's freedom in that. You find yourself shedding relationships that were built on a version of you that no longer exists. And it hurts, deeply, but it also liberates you. Because the more you remove what's not real, the more space you create for what is. You begin to crave truth over comfort, intimacy over attention, integrity over image. You begin to redefine success in your own language, and in doing so, you reclaim your life from the hands of expectation. You don't need to arrive anywhere to be valid. You don't need to be seen to be valuable. You don't need to be fast to be fulfilled. Your 30s are not a detour. They are the destination you didn't know you were always heading toward. And when you arrive, truly arrive, it won't be dramatic. It won't be loud. It will be a quiet knowing, a steady heartbeat, a whisper that says, "This is what it feels like to come home to yourself." There's a particular kind of strength that only arrives after the storm, not the kind that makes noise, but the kind that allows you to stand still when everything around you demands movement. That's the strength you begin to cultivate in your 30s. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've finally stopped pretending that you have to. You stop chasing closure. You stop needing explanations from those who left. You begin to see that healing doesn't always come from understanding the past. Sometimes it comes from surrendering to the present, from choosing to live even with unanswered questions, even with the ache of things unresolved. And as you embrace that surrender, you begin to soften, not in weakness, but in wisdom. You stop needing to win every argument, to be right all the time, to be liked by everyone. You start choosing peace over validation, over pride, over ego. There is a sacred shift that occurs when you stop performing for a life you thought you had to live and begin creating the life you truly want to feel. You start honoring your energy. You start listening to your body. You begin seeing time not as something to beat, but something to cherish. In your 30s, you realize that your most important relationship isn't the one you have with another person. It's the one you have with yourself, in the quiet, when no one is watching, when the masks are off, when the performance ends and the real you shows up, exhausted and imperfect and still worthy. You'll begin to understand that not everyone deserves access to your healing. that boundaries are not walls, they're doors with locks, and not everyone needs the key. You'll begin to say no, not as rejection, but as protection. And you'll realize that every no you speak is a deeper yes to your own life. You'll find beauty in solitude, not the kind that feels like loneliness, but the kind that feels like sanctuary. You'll start walking alone, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Because you've learned that sometimes the path forward requires space. Space to listen, space to break, space to grow in the dark. And in that darkness, something quiet begins to bloom. A sense of purpose that's no longer about proving anything, but about embodying something. Something deeper, something real, something no one can give you, and no one can take away. Your 30s are not late. They are just quiet. And sometimes the quiet path is the most powerful one. Because in silence you remember what you are, not what the world told you, not what your past shaped you into, but what you are, beneath the noise, the labels, the pressure. You are not a project to fix. You are a soul returning to itself. The truth is, no one is really ahead of you, and no one is behind. We're all just walking through our own timelines, carrying different lessons, fighting unseen battles, learning at our own rhythm. The illusion of being late comes from the belief that life is linear, that it must unfold in predictable steps, that happiness has an age stamp. But what if joy is not linear? What if growth comes in waves and healing in spirals? What if your pace, slow, steady, silent, is exactly what's saving you? You see, it's not too late to begin again. It never was. It's not too late to forgive yourself for the years spent chasing something that was never yours. It's not too late to walk away from what doesn't feel like home. It's not too late to change careers, to rest, to love, to start over, quietly, bravely, intentionally. The beauty of your 30s isn't in arriving, it's in shedding. Shedding the expectations, the old identities, the pressure to keep up. It's in allowing yourself to evolve in private, far from the noise, far from the audience, far from the script. And that's the secret no one tells you. This isn't the age of being lost. This is the age of being found. Found in the quiet moments, in the messy transitions, in the nights you cry and the mornings you rise anyway, in the slowness, in the stillness, in the choosing of yourself over and over again. You are not behind. You are healing. You are not broken. You are unfolding. You are not lost. You are being rerouted to something truer, quieter, more lasting. So breathe deeply, without apology, without shame. This is your sign, not to catch up, not to perform, but to begin with softness, with clarity, with the unshakable truth that you are allowed to rewrite your story. Let this decade be your quiet revolution. Let this chapter be your silent pivot. And when you lay down at night, let your heart whisper one thing: I'm not late. I'm just beginning, and that's more than enough.